health to wealth and everything in between. Welcome to the Weekend Collective on NewsTalk ZB.
We're talking property for the next hour. All things property on the OneRoof radio show. You can take part as well on 0800 80 1080. Text us on 9292. And we're joined by property commentator, regular guest on the Weekend Collective, Ashley Church. Good afternoon, Ashley.
Mr. Roxborough, how are you?
I'm very good. We've got Wilson here as well.
Good.
Hello, Mr. Church.
Hello. I'm sitting here in the Wellington studio looking at the National War Memorial and with the Basin Reserve over the top there. So very sporty feel to it. So.
Any cricket going on right now, Ashley?
No, there's not. But if I do launch into sporting metaphors or war stories, you'll know why. So.
It's actually quite handy having correspondence from our Wellington studio, because last time we had a correspondent in the Wellington studio, it was when the Royal Tour was on, and so we were talking about whatever we were talking about, plus getting updates on the Royal. So keep us posted on what's happening outside the window.
If I see Wells, I'll let you know.
We are discussing views. We want to hear your views, Ashley, about KiwiBuild. Now, drilling down especially on a place called Marfell, which people may or may not have heard of. It's a neglected New Plymouth neighbourhood. Pretty low socioeconomic. The average price of a home there is around 200 grand. From what I understand, KiwiBuild homes, they're probably going for around about 150,000 more than that. I don't get what's going on with KiwiBuild, because it seems that they said it's not a social housing proposition, but they're building these houses. The total cost $23 million in an area that seems like a social housing area. What's your take on it?
Oh, look, it's a bit of a tough one for Twyford, because I can understand why the residents in New Plymouth are upset, because there was 28 of these things bowled back in 2008 with the expectation that they'd be replaced with a housing project. Nothing happened for pretty much 10 years, and then now there's the announcement of this project, which is about housing which is out of reach of the people that I think probably expected that this development was going to cater to. So I understand why they're upset, but from Twyford's perspective, I think the focus is on getting as many of these KiwiBuild houses built around the country as quickly as possible. So I kind of get that. Whether you sort of mix metaphors with them, that's a legitimate question.
What I'd like to compare that to, though, Ashley, is the fact that they're building KiwiBuild houses in Wanaka. Wanaka, which is it's sort of like the opposite of a place like Marfell. Yeah. Because why the hell do they need to build KiwiBuild houses in Wanaka, where I assume most people who are there can take care of themselves? Yeah,
so if you remember, we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, Tim, and if you remember, the rationale for it is actually two different... KiwiBuild basically meets two different needs. One of those is ostensibly around social housing, so to the extent that they can provide houses that are cheap enough for people to buy them as first homes, then yes, it does meet that need. But the bigger issue, and this is the one that I think Twyford himself would probably acknowledge, is that it's about providing as many homes as possible within a shorter period of time as possible. It's this need to get 100,000 homes built as quickly as possible. And in that regard, where they sit in the market, I think probably legitimately doesn't matter. It's about simply making sure those homes are actually built.
You can give us a call, 0800 80 1080. KiwiBuild houses being built in the wrong places. Personally, I think that we may have two situations here where you've got, at one end of the spectrum, you've got an area of New Plymouth where the average house doesn't cost much at all. And so these KiwiBuild houses maybe aren't what the people there need. Remember that KiwiBuild is not state housing, that it is designed to increase the percentage of first home buyers in the market.
But didn't you just say earlier, Ashley, that there is a social housing aspect to KiwiBuild?
And that's why this one's so contentious, because when these houses were bowled 10 years ago, it was with the expectation that they'd be replaced with new social housing. So in that respect, and to be fair, it was a previous administration. So Twyford can quite legitimately say, well, that wasn't me. But so a new government's come in and they've said, look, it's more important that we actually build houses under KiwiBuild than we necessarily meet what was the original intention of this land. But I can completely understand why the locals would be upset by that.
All right, give us a bell, 0800 80 1080. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, it's just the government running a mile from their original commitment, really, and trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. I mean, they said that they were going to build thousands of houses. They haven't been able to. They said they were going to be affordable. They haven't been able to make them affordable, so now they're building them in crappy suburbs or areas so they can try and keep the cost down, which is only really going to create slums. And I think the thing that most Kiwis don't understand is this government have created this thing called KiwiBuild, and it's its own bureaucracy within the Housing and Urban Development Ministry. They now have 270 staff, of which none of them are builders. 270 staff, and over 120 of them are earning more than $100,000. That's a cost. And it's unbelievable. This bureaucracy is just madness. They're building no houses, and they've got this incredible bureaucracy that's just wasting taxpayers' money.
Mm. Those are all fair calls. I think probably in respect to this particular project, and if anybody of your Auckland listeners might remember years ago, back in the early 2000s, there was a road in St Heliers called Madeline Ave, or Mad Ave as it used to be referred to, and it was a social housing area that had all sorts of social problems.
Actually, I used to live near that area. You know what we used to call it?
Mad Ave.
Mad Ave, yeah.
Yep, yeah, and you'll remember then that the government actually came through and they bowled the whole lot. And they replaced it not with more social housing, but they brought private development in, and that area now is very upmarket, gentrified housing, and all of the social problems that were there have gone. Now, those on the left would argue that by doing that, all they've done is transfer that problem somewhere else.
I think the social problems have probably gone elsewhere.
Yeah, so what they've done, and you could argue the same thing will happen in New Plymouth, is that by putting in a development of this kind, potentially you actually gentrify that entire area, so you improve it, but by doing that, you actually transfer that problem to some other part of the city.
Question though, Ashley, just while we're on that topic, because it raises something I was thinking about. You're a property, you want to buy some property. Why the hell would you pay 150 grand more when the asking price is 200 grand in a suburb like Marfell that's not particularly good?
Oh, that's a really good question, and that comes down, I guess, to market economics. If that price is reasonable and fair and legitimate, people will pay it. If it's not, then the market will respond and that price will come back. So that will depend very much on whether or not that's actually reasonable.
And one thing that I'd say to Michael is that the government never said that they'd build thousands of houses within the first year. So the fact that there aren't thousands and thousands of KiwiBuild homes within 12 months of winning the election doesn't mean that the project has failed or not.
And it's probably just worth reiterating too, because we've talked about this before, guys, but it's probably just worth reiterating that because there's this whole issue of capacity building, which is about making sure that you can actually build those properties, and that was never going to happen in year one. The assumption is that, you're building less than 10,000 homes per year for the first 2 or 3 years, but by the time you get to year 7 or 8, you might be building 15 or 16,000 per year, so it should even itself out.
Ashley Church, love the knowledge that he has, property commentator on the program for the OneRoof radio show. You can take part by giving us a bell on 0800 80 1080. A KiwiBuild house is being built in the wrong places. What do you think, Sue?
Oh, hi, I'm ringing from my office in GI. Anyway, look, I do think it matters where the houses are situated, Ashley. Urban renewal is National's policy, as is the proposed UDA. I don't see any extra houses being built. After being land banked, what I see under KiwiBuild's model is existing desperate tenants in Housing New Zealand properties being displaced, like with Madeline and Esperance, they came over to GI. So people up the food chain, like all the foreigners in Madeline Ave, can purchase a property off the backs of the tenants. I think it's a disgusting property, and that place in Bay of Plenty should look on the Tamaki Housing website and pick up some info. They do need to fight back because there's a dirty, filthy land grab going on, and we had so many elderly people in their 70s and 80s die straight after being forced out of their homes they'd been in for 40, 50, 60 years. And I think anyone that supports it, including this government, is a disgrace.
Yes, so there's some truth in some of what you say. There's some legitimacy in some of what you're saying. I think the issue is, and I think both, probably National and Labour would put their hands up and admit to this. I think both of them, if they thought that they could build properties much more cheaply than they're currently putting them out under KiwiBuild, they would readily do so. The problem is that you actually can't build those houses for the sorts of money that the lower end of the market could afford to pay in order to justify them as first homes for those folk. So the problem that you've got is, unless the government starts stepping in and subsidising, and it's not going to do that, neither National nor Labour are going to do that, then you have to put the houses out at the sort of prices that are being charged at the moment, and that neglects, as you quite rightly say, that portion of the market that's been displaced over the last 20 or 30 years and can't afford to buy housing.
Sean, what do you think?
Can you answer me a question, that gentleman there? are people sleeping in their cars, can they afford a house that's worth 550 grand?
No. No, short answer to that's no. So there's a whole different set of social issues there around providing those people with housing, which aren't about buying a house. It's about literally just getting them into a home, but potentially provided by the state or under some scheme provided by the private sector.
So the state has plans for those people?
Sorry, say the question again.
The state has plans for those people?
Well, I mean, I'm not an apologist for the government, so I mean, I can't answer that on their behalf, but my understanding is that there's a body of work through Housing New Zealand which is specifically about those people, and it's about housing them, but it's certainly not about enabling them to buy houses. It's simply about getting them into a roof over their head.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good on you, Sean. Ashley Church is our special guest, and very succinctly put, that these are two separate things, because if KiwiBuild, even if it's got elements which may remind us of social housing, that if its primary focus is to encourage first home buyers, that's very different from someone sleeping in their car. You're not trying to get someone who's sleeping in their car to immediately be buying a house.
No, it's interesting too, Tim, because if you go back to, I mean, I think people sort of hark back to Mickey Savage in the 30s when social housing first started, and they remember sort of the halcyon days of, providing cheaper housing and all those things that went with that. And I think we'd all love to go back to those days, but the market's moved on. It's a different environment to what it was back in the 30s.
Ashley, I'm interested in, and this was a bit of a brouhaha during the week, about the contention that KiwiBuild is underfunded by about $18 billion. I don't know if you saw that, there was sort of like this mixed market model, mixed private public, let's say mixed of private money as well as public money, the government pairing with private developers, etc., etc. I think there's a problem with what KiwiBuild is. It sort of seems to constantly be changing exactly what it is. Do you feel there's a messaging issue here?
Yeah, well, not so much messaging. It actually has changed. So if you go back to, I mean, I had the pleasure of talking to Twyford well before they got elected about what they were proposing in this space, and it's reasonable to say that KiwiBuild has changed quite dramatically, not just in the term of this government, but even going back 8 or 9 months prior to these guys being elected. And so what's happened is that the reality of the market's kicked in, and that Twyford's recognised what he can and can't do within the constraints of the money that's been afforded to him through the budget, and within the mechanism of the market that he's got to operate with. And so he's become, in my view, more commercially pragmatic. He's recognised the realities of the market, and he's trying to make this thing work. But yes, it is a different process, and it is a different proposal to what it was even 12 months ago. And I actually rate him for that, because I think he's actually been reasonable and pragmatic, and he's actually doing the right things in respect of trying to understand how this whole thing fits together, rather than trying to push ahead with something that was never going to work.
What would you rate him out of 10 in what he's done so far?
Well, on intention, because most of it is just intention at the moment. It's still a long way from delivery. On intention, I'd rate him a 6.5 to a 7.
Just quickly, in what ways has it changed? What's an easy thing for people to understand, and what's changed?
Probably the most important was that I think in the early days of the project it was going to be basically completely government-led. So the government was going to be a developer, it was going to come in and do this itself. They've backed right away from that. It's much more now about the private sector. In fact, I notice even in the last few days there's even been more of a suggestion that that's going to become the case. And that's as it should be, with the government as the lead agency, and perhaps facilitating development of infrastructure and backing the financing to make sure that the risk is minimised, but basically letting the private sector do its work, and that's as it should be.
If you'd like to be on with us and with Ashley Church, property commentator, 0800 80 1080. So, KiwiBuild homes, and about 70 of them are going to be built in a part of New Plymouth, which is called Marfell, and it has been described as a pretty down-and-out area. We're wondering, being that the KiwiBuild homes will average, their median price will be about 450 grand, and in Marfell, the median price, and there's two different sources here. One saying it's 271,000, another one saying it's 326, but it's a lot less than the KiwiBuild homes. So does that mean KiwiBuild houses are being built in the wrong places? Jenny, what do you think?
Hello?
Hi. Oh, you're Jimmy. I called you Jenny.
I don't think this is Jenny.
Yeah.
Jimmy. Sorry, Jimmy.
I was reading the Dynamic Business on Wednesday's supplement to the Herald, and they got 200 top New Zealand companies' top profits. And why isn't that money being used to build houses for the people? All these companies, massive profits. Auckland Airport, 650. Kainga Road, 563 million. What? I mean, people need homes. And in today's paper also, the Herald, in the supplement, where all the 30,000 kids going to school hungry, and in living in poverty. And these homes, like somebody mentioned before, I've just turned the radio on, were built by the first Labour government in 1935 for low-income families. And now what the government have done, as I mentioned to you before, I think, was that they've been handed over to speculators and developers. Right, 69,000 state houses being privatised by John Key, and he had no mandate whatsoever to do that.
Hey, Jimmy, I just got to just jump in there. What you're saying is take all the profits off the top 200 private companies in New Zealand and then build houses out of them. That sounds to me like communism, which is another word for theft, don't you think, Ashley Church?
Well, I mean, I probably wouldn't put it quite so bluntly because I understand where Jimmy's coming from, but that mechanism, I think it would be unlikely to work in the market. It's interesting when you reflect back on that Mickey Savage stuff back in the 30s. I mean, that was coming out of the back of the Great Depression. So the government was involved in massive work schemes. It was essentially printing money in the same way that the US and Europe are at the moment to make sure that it could actually provide people with work. And so the development of infrastructure, the building of houses, a whole range of other things were being done on the back of that, primarily to actually put people into work. We're not in that situation now. The country's in a completely different state, and as much as I might agree with Jimmy that that was a great process at the time and a great program, that wouldn't work now. We've got to find different ways of solving this issue.
That was one of the first questions I ever asked my dad as a little boy, 4 years old, about money was, why don't we just print more? Why don't they just print more?
They are.
and then you grow up and you realise that there's qualitative easing,
quantitative easing, yeah.
And it's happening in
quantitative easing, sorry, not qualitative, yeah.
Yeah, it's quantitative. Yeah. It's quantitative because the fact is the quality of it is going down because the more of it there is, the less value it has. Although,
having said that, and I'll just jump in, the interesting thing is that the reason that hasn't happened for the last 40 or 50 years is because it was always thought that it would be inflationary. If you printed more money, it would push it would push the price of goods up. That actually hasn't happened in the countries that have done it. So there's a legitimate argument to look at it.
Unless you can just do it privately, just for yourself.
I think
that's right.
Roxy has an unacknowledged future as an economist. It's like, Dad, why don't they just do this? They should be doing it.
A young economist.
It's stealing the plates that make the money, which has been depicted in several films. 0800 80 1080. Sharon, g'day.
Hi there. I'm enjoying this discussion, and I understand what you guys are saying about the KiwiBuild. But a couple of weeks ago, I was listening on the radio, and I just Googled it actually. There was a report released called Beyond Renting, released by the Salvation Army, and I think they're pretty good. They've got a lot of knowledge about the whole situation. But it was released by the Army's Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit. Yep. But what they said was that while KiwiBuild is a great initiative, on its own, it's not enough to solve the problems that we face. And they suggested a Kiwi buy system scheme, which I thought sounded terrific. And what it said was to assist modest households into home ownership rather than having to rent. A government subsidised home ownership program was required. So, I mean, and to me that sounds logical. You can't just have one thing happening. We know that modest households are not able to buy these houses. I mean, everyone's got to acknowledge that. And the other thing I want to ask about are people in NZ housing, can they buy their houses now? Because they used to be able to in the old days. Because a friend of mine's parents had been in their house for a long time and they were offered it for sale to purchase.
Both really good questions. Let me respond to the one about the Sallies. I saw that report. It was actually a really good report, but it had a flaw in it. And the flaw was this. So they were talking about a thing called shared equity. So what they were basically saying was that you needed a program where the government owned a bit and the purchaser owned a bit, and that over a period of time they could purchase the rest off the government. And that's actually a really good idea, and the government's doing some work at the moment around trying to find some solutions in that space. The problem with the solution by the Sallies is that it wasn't actually shared equity, it was basically subsidised equity. They were talking about the state subsidising the purchase of the property to get people into it. And while we might like that idea, that just isn't going to happen, but neither National or Labour are going to do that. A, it's too expensive, and B, it sends a whole lot of bad, deleterious messages to the market. So if you can come up with a shared equity scheme that actually eventually enables people to purchase their full property off the government while the government maybe helps them with it in the early stages, brilliant. But that particular proposal wasn't it, unfortunately.
Actually, my understanding is that there is a shared equity scheme that's being operated by Habitat for Humanity in New Zealand or piloted, and it's going really, really well. We should certainly be looking at that.
Yeah, well, so the Habitat for Humanity is mainly sweat equity. So what happens there is they actually build the houses one at a time. and the parties that are involved actually get involved in the construction of the property. And Habitat aren't a profit-making organisation. They basically make these things so that they cover their costs, get it into the market, and then build the next one. So they make enough on them that it helps them to fund the purchase and the development of the next one. It's a really good model, but you couldn't transfer that to a very large scale because it's very much a philanthropic program.
And such good folks. And Jimmy Carter for years and years involved with that. And
Terrible president, great ex-president.
Well, whether he was a terrible president or not, clearly a good guy and absolutely a great ex-president, and still out there doing it, when he's in his 90s.
Just imagine what Trump's going to be like. Sorry, should we go to another call?
Don't mention his name. We will take a break. 0800 80 1080 if you'd like to be on. It's the OneRoof radio show. We talk all things property this hour on the Weekend Collective. Ashley Church, property commentator, our special guest. It's 4:27.
Try to follow the rules. I break every one of them with boys like you.
Weekend Collective on NewsTalk ZB. Tim Roxburgh, Tim Wilson with you at 4:30. You can check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/ZB The Two, still the old address from our previous show, The Two, but it's now the Weekend Collective. And if you go there, you'll see that somebody who listens to the program and has done since day one has posted a photo of herself when she had to dress up as Santa. Now, I know that's not why you've rung, Adrian, but...
Oh, no.
But this photo of you, given the story today...
I wondered where he was going with that, Adrian.
Yeah, I was beginning to wonder too.
but given the story today of a bit of a... You said brouhaha before, Tim, another brouhaha involving the guy who used to be Santa at the Santa Parade.
You just made it too ha-ha.
That's right. He's not doing it anymore. So, Adrian, quickly, before we get to the KiwiBuild stuff, how did you come to be Santa?
Well, because our Santa let us down at the last minute, and it was an emergency. There were children arriving, and we had to have one fast. So pillows were gathered, and I was stuffed into gumboots and into the suit, and there I was.
I have to say, you look adorable. You look very cuddly.
Oh, thank you.
Can I just say though, you don't look super Santa-y. I mean, you're wearing the outfit and you're doing your best, but it still looks like smiley, lovely, feminine Adrian underneath it.
Arrived very early this year too.
Yeah, I did do my best.
All right, so on to KiwiBuild.
Yeah, well, this is housing, of course, is one of my hobby horses as well, as Sue, Housing Sue, but probably for different reasons. It's been interesting. I've just been in Wellington for 5 days, and we were visiting the area up around Porirua and Whitby, where my parents used to live, and several things shocked me. One was that seeing again all these state houses on huge pieces of land, which would fit, like 4 apartments on them. You see that everywhere in Porirua. And the other thing that shocked me probably even more was Whitby, which is about 4 times the size it was when my parents lived there about 15 years ago. But it is completely covered in enormous houses. And I think overall New Zealanders' expectation of housing is totally unrealistic. And we're expecting, large places that are not necessarily appropriate for the way that we live now. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked at. Now, something else that bothers me is the pricing. There is a lot of slack in the building pricing materials market. I know from people who have built and who've paid cash for things, who sometimes will get stuff for about 1/10 of the retail price. And also, I've interviewed a number of house owners, including several who imported all their joinery, their walls, their windows and doors, one from Germany, one from America, about 100 times better quality than you can get here, and triple glazing and so on, beautiful quality. And it costs them less, or in one case the same, as what they could buy our aluminium joinery here.
Okay, Adriana, we've just got to bring Ashley in on this. Is there lots of slack in the building supplies part of the market?
No, as I understand it, there's not, and that's actually getting tighter all the time. But the one thing I do want to pick up on with Adrian, I kind of agree with her, although it's interesting to put in historical context on it, is this issue around our expectations of houses. And it's interesting because the two Tims and I in particular, I don't know how old you are, Adrian, we'll probably remember him. This, you're getting old when you talk this way, but if you go back to when we were buying first times, 20 or 30 years ago, and you used bear crates as seats, and your table was made out of an old door or something, and you did that for a few years or till you could actually afford to buy a property. So the house that you bought was a much more modest, dwelling that it is now. But to put that in some context, if your grandmother was talking to you at the time, she would have said, well, when I was washing clothes, I wasn't doing it in a washing machine. I was doing it in a bucket with some water, and I was cooking meals over an open fire. I wasn't doing it on an oven. So all of those things move forward. I don't think the fact that people's expectations have progressed over that period of time necessarily is a bad thing. It's just a reflection of what's happened to society over the last 30 or 40 years. And if we can continue to do it, we should do.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that one.
No, fair call. Fair call.
That's the debate. That's good. That's
hey,
good.
Listen, I just want to add a text in here, Ashley, from Chris. Solutions for housing, import houses, US 5,000, and workers from Thailand. Various designs. I guess it's the whole prefabricated thing. He likes the Ban Patan design. You can see this on YouTube. Is that a possibility? Super cheap.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And so, and I think you'll see more of that over the next 10 or 15 years, this whole concept of prefabricated, which incidentally will bring with it its own political issues. Because while at the moment people are saying, hey, what a great idea, let's bring in prefabricated housing, when you've got tens of thousands of these things being built, people will be starting to say, hey, hang on, that's putting Kiwis out of jobs, it's basically bringing it's
and also
sort of
boxes made of ticky-tacky.
All that, although they won't necessarily be, although some of these things will actually be pretty impressive, but they will be prefabricated, they'll be brought in on boats, and they'll be put together basically as Lego once they get here. And so there'll be a whole range of issues around whether that's a good or a bad thing for your society. But that's definitely coming because it's going to have to in order to keep costs down.
Ashley Church, property commentator, is our special guest. Adrian, by the way, thank you for the call. And if you want to see Adrian when she had to stand in as Santa for an event when Santa didn't turn up and no one could do it, and so Adrian did, and I would say whether she looks like Santa or not, she looks very jolly and lovely. Facebook.com/Zebby the2. It's the Weekend Collective's Facebook page. 0800 80 1080 to be on the program. Bob, hello.
Oh, hi. Oh, well, you just have to recognise that Ashley, for all his enthusiasm, is not an economist. He's all about getting maximum profits for private people and even the real estate agents.
I noticed where
does this come from?
Let's just back the truck up.
Where does this come from?
Can I just say, Bob, every time you have rung us with Ashley, you've always had this little precursor to getting into the conversation where it's a dig at Ashley. So you've had your digs.
Yep.
Move that to one side, and Bob, welcome along.
Okay, but I can see how far he's swinging things. I mean, I'm in the public banking movement. I was on a foreign think tank on it. Anyway, look, the social housing of Mickey Savage in the 30s is nothing like the quantitative easing practiced by the USA recently, which is actually just increasing debt. But anyway, we'll get another discussion. Okay, shared equity is good, and he agrees with that. But see, rent to own is the best thing of the lot, and in fact, the Greens endorse that. The problem is that you need to first hit the low-cost housing because that's all been wiped out. And that's John Keats sold off over 60,000 state houses, and then you add to the rapid immigration, the unlimited foreign cash, which is often speculative, and the New Zealand speculating in the housing thing, and it's basically wrecked the Auckland housing market.
See, this is where I agree. I think I agree with Bob in terms, Ashley, of where is the greatest and most pressing need, and I'm not convinced it's in the segment of the market being serviced by KiwiBuild. It seems to me you start at the bottom of the ladder and work up.
Yeah, look, I agree with that too. I think that the issue is not that.
We all agree with Bob.
yeah, exactly. Which I'll comment on that in a moment. But so I agree with that as well. The problem is that it's a much more difficult issue to resolve. So it's not that this government or the previous one weren't focused on actually fixing it. It's just that it's much harder. The KiwiBuild stuff's actually pretty straightforward because the market determines what the price is going to be, and they sell and everybody's happy. But providing cheaper housing to the people that actually need it at the bottom of the market, much more difficult to actually resolve. But Bob, just in respect to your comment, because I always love your feedback, mate. But I mean, look, I have a view on this. It doesn't mean it's right. I put my opinion. Yours is valid. There's lots of people out there who are animated trying to resolve this. The good thing is that lots of people are actually fixated on it. Hopefully, between us, we actually come up with a solution that's going to work.
What do you think Bob was like on that think tank? I mean, pretty.
Listen, stop it, Roxy. Ashley was being gracious, and you go and ruin it with your. Man, what do you think Bob was like in the think tank?
A more sensible comment, which I should have made, which is nothing to do with that, is just a reminder that if we wind the clock back, say 18 months ago, and the build-up to the election, and then just over a year ago, during that election campaign, that housing was a massive topic as it is now, but it was never just a topic about homelessness and people sleeping in cars. It was very much a topic about prices being out of control and people fleeing our largest cities, not fleeing, but people leaving the largest city because they can't, they make all right money, but they just can't get on the property ladder.
But then they get redistributed to the provinces and everyone's happy.
So, but that's just a reminder of where we were at, which is why there may be multiple approaches needed to sort out issues with housing in New Zealand. Let's go to the phones. You can be on with Ashley Church. In fact, we better take a quick break. 0800 80 1080 is the number to chat with us and with Ashley at 21 to 5. It's the Weekend Collective, just coming up to 4:45 on a Saturday afternoon. Tim Wilson with you through until 6. 0800 80 1080. Text us on 9292. Apparently the rent's going up in the Wilson household. We'll find out that yarn in a moment, why that's happening. Ashley Church is our property commentator, special guest. And Mike, g'day, welcome.
G'day, Ashley. How are you, mate?
G'day, mate.
Very good. And now you know that I always support what you say, so all very
You're a
good.
smart man, Mike.
Do you two know each other?
No, I have no idea, but...
hey, look, let me throw something at you guys. So look, I live in Christchurch. Look, just over a year ago, my mum went into a rest home and sort of downsizing, and she had a little wee two-bedroom ownership flat, owned it since it was brand new in South Brighton. All the earthquake repairs done, absolutely fabulous. We sold that for $245,000. Okay, right. Nice little wee starter. Now, I'm not suggesting there's 100,000 of those floating around in Auckland. I don't know, but a quick search on Trade Me shows more than 300 listings in Canterbury at less than $250,000.
Yep.
Why aren't people, first home buyers, buying those things? Why does everyone want a Mike Greer 3-bedroom ensuite double garage brand new place?
The answer to the question, Mike, is I think they kind of are, and not just in Canterbury, but also in other parts of the country. And that's the interesting thing. I was having a chat to somebody about this the other day. Is that you go back 20 years, the reason that people went to places like Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch was because if you were going to have a career or you were going to do the things that you wanted to do with your life, you needed to be in those locations. That's not true now. You can live in any part of the country. The internet's basically made it possible to do business in places that you couldn't previously have done so. So I think what you'll see over the next 10, 15, 20 years is you'll see a rejuvenation, a revitalisation of parts of the, not just Canterbury, but Dunedin, Hawke's Bay, New Plymouth. All of these places are going to start to repopulate as people recognise that they can get a better deal and a better home for less money in some of those parts of the country.
And I think that's got to be beneficial for the whole country. If we're not all crammed, can I just say, speaking selfishly, on certain roads at certain times of the day, trying to get to the same blasted place, life's going to be sweet. The future.
I think that, Tim, that light bulb's just gone on over the last couple of years and people...
Look, I'll see you on the main street of Whanganui in 10 years, Ashley.
Look forward to it, mate.
Well, humans are like salmon in many ways, or maybe only one way, which is that a lot of people like to go back to where they first grew up. And salmon do that, and they die where they were born.
Yep. Yep.
Oh, is that a bit depressing?
That's a bit depressing, but thanks.
He was doing so well, wasn't he?
Okay, I'll lighten it up. I'll bring it back.
Us all out.
No, I'll bring it back very quickly. That salmon swim upriver, and they're able to sort of jump up the river. They're so determined.
Not sure where this metaphor is going, but okay.
To get back home, and maybe that'll be Wilson back to Whanganui.
Hey guys, I want to share something with you because there's been a bit of a debate. The National Party's been blaming government policies on rental increases of up to 50 a week in the past year. My landlord, who we love our landlords, they're fantastic people, and he sort of approached us, sort of looking. He didn't look happy about this conversation. He's got, look, I've got to put the rent up, and this is for giving notice for the beginning of the of the rental year in February that the rent's going up, and it's not by a massive amount, but he said, and the exact quote was, I'm just going back on this place with the insurance that I'm now having to pay. the rise in house insurance, this is something that I haven't seen in debate of why rents are going up. Is there anything you're hearing, Ashley, about
Yeah, there is.
about
Yeah,
this?
there is, and it's not just about insurance. So this whole concept of so the Nats have come out and said, and they've based these figures on MB figures, so they're real. The Nats have said, hey, look, their average rental increase per year, or the median increase per year over their period of office was $12 per week increase in any given year. That's now gone up to 30. And that's based on MB figures, so it's based on real data. There's actually a number of reasons for this. The first of them is, and this is one that everybody sort of tends to forget, is that when markets are going strongly, and as the Auckland and the rest of the country did up until about a year and a half ago, a lot of property investors actually forego rent increases because they're getting 50, 60 grand in capital growth. They're not quite so fixated on actually putting the rents up.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, when the market flattens, they start to fixate on making sure they get the best return possible. So rentals tend to go up a bit more. But there's some other stuff as well. There's the stuff around healthy homes, with the legislation there, which is actually having a real impact on actually increasing the cost to landlords, the actual costs. There's a little bit of work going on with the Residential Tenancies Act, which is going to have an impact. And then there's all this stuff which hasn't happened, but that's having a psychological impact around the potential for capital gains taxes, which they're all scared of. And also Robertson's indicated that he's going to take away the ability or he's going to ring fence tax losses so that they won't be able to claim them against their personal income. So all of that stuff's conspiring to put rentals up. There's no doubt about that.
What about the insurance issue?
Well, the insurance issue is just one more feeder. So I mean, I haven't heard anything.
That was what my landlord. That was the thing that he's just like, it's gone up, and he seemed quite, I guess, startled by the surge in this insurance cost.
Yeah. So you're in Auckland, aren't you, Tim?
That's right.
Yeah, so I mean, I was trying to think, for example, whether that might have been related to Canterbury or something happening there that had pushed premiums up in a particular part of the country. So I'm not aware of anything which has necessarily had an impact to push them up dramatically. But there have been increases over the last 4 or 5 years. Immediately after the Christchurch earthquake, there was a big jump, but then they came down again.
Was it just an excuse to tell the Wilsons?
Well, yeah. Well, yes.
No, I
don't want to cast aspersions.
You know what? You did that salmon dying thing, and now you're attacking my landlord. I'm going to have to step you out, take you outside of the pub, and give you a bunch of fines.
This is the thing. Yeah. What if your landlord's given you a bogus reason?
No, he wouldn't, because he's an honest guy,
and
he
seemed
genuinely perplexed by it, and that's why I wanted to raise it with you. Not because the rental increase, I would say, is quite reasonable, but it's just like, I wonder what's happening, and maybe there's a number of things.
What I would say, Tim, is over the next 2 or 3 years, you can expect to see some quite steep increases in rentals, certainly in metropolitan centres, as some of the stuff that starts to kick in, because landlords will want to recover it.
And I'm sure the opposition will make hay from that.
I'm sure they will too.
Just on that one very quickly, Ashley. So do you predict then that the rental increase from the past year will lower somewhat from that mark of 30?
No,
it'll stay around that amount.
No, it's going up.
They're all higher. Yeah, they're all higher. Yeah.
Ashley Church, that's all we've got time for. Property commentator, great to have you on.
Always good.
It's 10 minutes to 5, so that wraps up another OneRoof radio show.
I love a little bit. I love to go to church on a Sunday, but if I can go and listen to Ashley Church on a Saturday, I'm a happy man as well, Roxy.
That was tremendous.
Is that as good as your salmon one?
No, well, I actually made a rum and coke joke about ramen noodles earlier on in the program, which I think sort of passed everyone by, and probably that was a good thing.
I think we preferred to keep moving.
Yeah. But no, I think you outdid me with your little line there. And we'll send the nation chuckling as we head to an ad break or not. And back in just a moment, 9 minutes to 5.